Good morning. Today we are speaking to Avraham Burg in Israel-Palestine. Today is Sunday, July 5th. So that means we are 4 days after July 1st, which was announced as the first day when the new Israeli government could start with the announced annexation of Palestinian territories in the West Bank. Our partner today is Avraham Burg. Avraham Burg is a very senior and very long-serving Israeli politician. Allow me to the first question to put a little bit on your personal development, because you have a long career. You started always in the left peace movement, but after that, for many years, you were active politician mainly with the Labour Party. You were many years a member of Knesset. You were Speaker of Knesset between 1999 and 2003. In a year 2000, you served even for a few months as acting president of Israel. And you were even, beside that, for a couple of years, chairman of the Jewish Agency. And now you are very active in the so-called Joint List, political alliance between left-wing Israeli and Palestinian politicians and parties. How did it come? Because it's a long way from Jewish Agency to the Joint List. Could you just explore it a little bit or explain it a little bit? Because I think this might be even give some ideas about the whole development in Israel.
Good morning, Fritz. Good morning to all of our listeners and watchers. I didn't walk much on my positions about Israel. Its present time and future did not change much during the last couple of decades. I was always against occupation. I was always against unilateral measures. I was always against the mixture of church and state. And I didn't change much of my positions. What happened is that the Israeli society and the Israeli political system was transformed into much more right-wing, conservative, more religious, and much less tolerant and open toward ideas of peace. So the more the political system moved to the right, and the more I find myself in my old position, it's only natural to find new alignment and new connections with people who believe that the future of the place and the future of the region lies deep in the cooperation and the partnership, the real partnership between equals, between Jews and Arabs, between Israelis and Palestinians. And that's a conclusion. Vote for the party you believe in its values.
This is interesting. Let's jump to the next question, because this is connected to that. The result of the last elections demonstrated again the political developments in Israel more and more continuously to the right. And the new government, at the beginning, it was a surprise for some people in the world, because they believed for a short time that the new list with Mr. Gantz was something, an alternative to Netanyahu. Finally, it turned out that this was just an error. So how do you assess the political situation nowadays? As I mentioned before, we are 4 days after the deadline for the continuous occupation, annexation. So how do you assess, and what do you expect to be happening in Israel within the coming days or weeks?
First, about your question about the elections, the only clear-cut outcome of the election was that more than 50% of the Israeli population voted against Netanyahu. Yes, right after the elections began a political process that his political skills maneuvered the very naive, ill-experienced Benny Gantz to a corner in which he lost actually the real meaning of the elections. But the overwhelming majority of the Israelis are against Netanyahu, and he is still a prime minister, I think, not for long. I think his days are numbers. I cannot count them in days or weeks or months or a year or two, but I think that's the end of his regime. Point number two, the annexation is very well connected into it. Annexation is an artificial political manipulation. It's not about substance. Substance means we have a strategy how to live between the Jordan and the Mediterranean. What should be the relationship between us and the Palestinians? What should be the relationship within Israel between the 80% Jews and the 20% non-Jews, mainly Arabs? I mean, it should come with a package, strategic package deal. None of it happened. It was a kind of a declaration out of the political needs and the political pressures of both Prime Minister Netanyahu, who is indicted in court nowadays, and a very strange, I would say almost embarrassing president sitting in the White House having the same kind of political pressures. So it is a political public opinion, public relations manipulation, but has no substance behind it, and therefore nothing will come out of it.
So, precisely, you don't expect any further steps to implement the annexation?
You know, in a reality in which a whimsical president is jumping according to a logic nobody understands in Washington,
yeah,
and a very pressed, failing both failing on the corona and on economy and on so many other things, you do not know what kind of rabbit they will take out of their sleeves just to save tomorrow morning's headline. But when you look at it seriously, is this plan both the deal of the century and the annexation the Israeli right wing wants to annex parts of the West Bank, does it have a real comprehensive solution and settlement between Israel and Palestine? The answer is definitely not. Nothing. At the year 2020, with the requirement, and I will say the outcry for world cooperation between states and regions and organizations in order to fight together the pandemic, nothing at that time justifies unilateral, brutal, or cynical political measures. And therefore, unilateral, one-sided, quite aggressive, right-wing measure in Israel, which is not coordinated with the rest of the Israeli society, with the Palestinian Authority, with the Jordanians, with the Egyptians, with the Europeans, with at least half of the political system in the United States of America. This is not part of the spirit of the time, which requires dialogue and conversation, and therefore also doomed to fail because it is so unilateral.
In that context, a question. You mentioned that as we know that the Israeli society is rather split and polarized, but on the other hand, just in the last days, there were some, even for me and others, disturbing statements by traditional left-wing political parties in Israel, like Meretz. So Meretz was always the left socialist party, and we heard that leading politicians from Meretz said, okay, why not? Annexation is possible. What do you expect for that, and how do you comment this?
To tell you the truth, you are more well familiar with the nuances of the irrelevant margins of Israeli politics that I am. I don't know who said what, but it is so insignificant. So not important. These people have no position, these people have no power, these people have no concept and no philosophy. And I believe that the real struggle in Israel today is not necessarily between one state and two states and this declaration, annexation, or the other declaration. It's actually two sets of decisions in front of the political system of Israel. The first is, what kind of a one state will it be? Will it be the current one, which is one state with two regimes, one full of privileges for the Jews and the other full of discriminations for the Palestinians? Or will it be one state in which every individual between the Jordan and the Mediterranean has the right for the same rights? I do not see now, maybe next week, maybe next month, maybe next year. But as for now, I do not see the two-state solution as a real, still alive formula. The second thing is, it's about time to move the political discourse within Israel from a national discourse, all the Jews versus all the Palestinians, to something different, from national or nationalistic concepts on one hand and civil politics on the other hand. I belong to those who believe that the organizing principle of the political system in Israel should be a civil one, equality to all of its citizens, and therefore the cooperation and the partnership and being members in the same party of Jews and Arabs alike around this concept that we share the same citizenship, we share the same place, we share the same privileges, and therefore this is a full-scale democracy versus all of those who believe in privileges, in discriminations, and what have you, which is so bad for the future of Israel.
This is important, especially for Western and European ears, because officially, almost all European, for instance, European politicians are still focusing on the two-state solution. I think any statement starts, we are still supporting the two-state solution and there is no alternative. So it seems that in the meantime, more and more people, even this is the way I understood your statement just before, believe that the old solution, two-state solution coming from the partition plan till Oslo is dead.
I'm not married to any formula or any solution. Whatever is agreed between the sides, between the Israeli government and the Palestinian government, agreed upon, signed, and becomes a covenant or become an agreement between the two national communities, I'm happy. As a principle, I do not count states. I don't count one state, two states, 5 states. I count rights. So if we speak about situation in which you guarantee to me that under the Israeli domain and around the Israeli domain and space, every individual has the same rights with one state, I'm happy. 2 states, I'm happy. Federation, okay. Federation, fine with me. Don't trouble me with the bureaucratic structure. Talk to me about the principle. And the principle is not counting states, but counting rights and human rights and democratic rights. The second is, if you ask me as a political analyst, I do not see now, and again, the Middle East is volatile, the situation is quite explosive, and whatever you don't see today, you might see better tomorrow. But as for now, Sunday morning, the two-state solution has no life left into it.
Yeah.
Israel successfully cantonized the Palestinian space into so many roads and highways and tunnels and settlements and outposts and you name and check roads and checkposts and roadblocks, etc., that whomever will take this left over of the Palestinian territory will find it very difficult to organize it as a state, especially when this current state of Israel, in a very cynical, manipulative way, do not want the Palestinian political system to unify and have a national unity agreement between Fatah and Hamas, as difficult as it is, and therefore have one solution for the Palestinian people. They prefer two Palestinian states, one in Gaza of Hamas, which weakens the one in Ramallah, which is Fatah. And as long as the Israelis in Jerusalem will not accept the fact that the entire Palestinian people is one people with the right for the self-definition and self-determination, as the Israelis have this right, we shall never move onwards with two-state solution. As for now, actually, we have a de facto reality of one-state solution with two regimes, or three-state solutions with three regimes. One Israel, one Palestine in Ramallah, and one Palestine in Gaza. So I don't see tomorrow morning an implementation of the two-states formula, but if this is the comfort zone which enables Europeans in the Western community, and maybe some others, Chinese and Russians and others, to support a just and fair agreement between Israelis and Palestinians, so be it.
Okay, let's come to Europe and the European position. For sure, you are well aware of the discussions inside the EU. For sure, you know that after the last council meeting, the 27 member states couldn't agree on one united declaration, since two countries, unfortunately, including my own country, Austria, boycotted such a unified statement. So what exactly do you expect from Europe? What do you expect from us?
My attitude towards the European foreign policy is not much different than the one towards the United States of America. I, as an Israeli, not expect you to come as my big sister, my big brother, and say, hey, we come to save you from yourself. No, we have to deal with it, as difficult as it is between us, and then between us and the Palestinians. My expectations from Europe is to live up upon its values and upon its interests. Values means a lot. What is happening now in the Middle East is still leftovers of poisonous history of Europe during the 19th and 20th century, both colonialism and the Holocaust. And if Europe has some responsibility for the Middle East, that's the time to express this historical responsibility. The second is to understand that it is not us sitting in our boat and drilling a hole at the floor of our cell because it's my cell and it's my room. What do you care? No, no, the whole boat is going down if you drill a hole in one room. And it means it's us and the Palestinians, us and the Palestinians and Jordanians, us and the Palestinians and Jordanians and Egyptians and Saudis, and maybe later on the Lebanese and the Syrians, and who knows whom else. I mean, something like this is one domino stone that one removed, the one falls forward, can bring down a very, very fragile structure that once down will knock again on the doors of Europe. You saw what happened, and I'm sorry for the historical reading, but when George W. Bush invaded Iraq with a kind of a fully deceived excuse looking for weapon of mass destruction after September 11th, that the Iraqis were not involved at all. He brought Iraq down, created a vacuum, ISIS walked in, Sykes-Picot collapsed, Syria inflamed, and all of a sudden, million refugees knocking on the door of Europe, and Europe doesn't know what to do. With this kind of collapsing structure, I'm afraid that the pressure on Europe will be much higher. So when you ask me what Europe has to do, Europe has to do what Europe has to do, whatever is good for you, regardless of what is good for me. I will deal with my own politics. As a majority, as a minority, maybe I will succeed. I will fail. That's my responsibility for my country, for my people. But what is the responsibility of Europe for Europe? This is a question I'm asking, and for too many years, I never heard an answer.
Yeah, this is right. And unfortunately, when we look back the last months and 1-2 years, the so-called best and closest friends to Israel, to the Israeli government, were not mainly the European left-wingers, but more and more the right European, the European nationalists were the friends of Netanyahu. So this is interesting because sometimes parties in Europe who has a clear historic position when we go back to the last century Holocaust, now they are immediately supporting the right wing in Israel. So this made even the European position a little bit complicated. But precisely, there is an association agreement between Israel and the European Union. In the first two articles of this association agreement, it's very clearly said that human rights have to be respected, democracy, dialogue, peace building. Nothing of these things happened. So in Europe, there is now a discussion what to do, and some part of the European politicians and parties, they said, we warned Israel already 100 times that settlement policy is illegal, it's against human rights. So it doesn't make sense to have the 101st declaration and warning. The only language the Israeli government might understand is sanctions. What do you respond to this demand?
Well, answer it from three different points, three different angles. The first one is, let Europe do whatever Europe wants to do. I mean, you want to sanction me, sanction me. You don't want to sanction me, don't sanction me. Do what is good for Europe. Don't do what is good for Israel or for Palestine, as I said earlier. The second is, I'm afraid that some of these sanctions might never work. And here it comes, so you can implement it and you can declare it and et cetera. I don't see how will it work, practically speaking. So why climbing a tree that eventually you cannot climb down, politically speaking? And then comes the last element, and this is a very crucial emotional one. Europe always, or at least the EU, always looking for one unified foreign policy. It hardly has one internal economic or internal policy, but let's say foreign policy is nothing of the nature of your question can ever happen as long as Germany is there. And Germany is still, this current generation, and I say it from, I would say, analytical point of view. As long as this generation who still remembers the last century or had parents who has been to the horrors and atrocities of the Second World War, as long as this is the generation in power in Germany, Germany will not move a millimeter against Israel, and therefore Europe will not have a foreign policy of this nature. But in 20 years down the road, 10 years down the road, when a new generation will take off in Germany and in Austria, and in a few other places. And these people will say, haven't been there. It's our grandparents, we never saw it. It's Attila the Hun. It's like, I don't know, Friedrich Barbarossa. I mean, what do we know? It's such a far history. Stop torturing about it. When this generation will take over, the overcredit Israel gets for the history of the Jewish people in Europe will be over. And then there will be a different European policy and politics. I'm afraid that strategically speaking, the Israeli leaders prefer to leave the daily immediate tactics rather than seeing the continental shift around the corner of generational change coming soon towards us.
Yeah, I think you mentioned even that what applies to Germany applies the same for Austria. Even now, even the legal situation is almost the same, because also the new Austrian government, they applied now that like in Germany, the existence and the right to existence for Israel is state policy. It's official. This is now also in Austria, but it ignores in a little bit the responsibility of the Germans and the Austrians is not only for the Jewish, clearly for the Jewish, because 6 million were eliminated by the Nazis. But at the same time, there is even a second people which have been affected by the European policy in the last century. So this is something which is very often ignored in debates, that it's not only one people which have been victims. So this is something which we in Europe try to convince our people, that at the same time, you have to take into consideration your responsibilities for the Jewish people and for the Jewishness. It's the same also for the Palestinians, because they have been affected. So this is a debate we have internally in Europe, and unfortunately, it's not very successful, also because of the policy and the measurements of the last Israeli government. So therefore, we try to find a new position. You are right that there is no unified European foreign policy, but just in the Middle East issue now, it was, as I mentioned before, 25-2. So 25 would have been ready to make a rather strong statement, and at the end there was no statement. It was just a private statement by Mr. Borrell, which was not authorized by the Council. So anyhow, we will have this debate very soon, and there has to be a European position. And what you said is that it's not, frankly, I understood you that you mean it's not that much important for the future developments in Israel and Palestine what the European Council will decide or not. Is this wrong, or is this right?
It is correct, but it doesn't have the power it could have had. I mean, if the entire European Union, with all of its states, plus Great Britain, maybe because Boris Johnson took a very harsh position, very explicit position with the letter he wrote to the Israelis, etc., it had a very persuasive position. But since Europe today is what it is today and cannot get to one position, it doesn't really know how to do, so it is very fragmented and less impressive, let's put it like this. The Israeli politicians, as for now, do not see it as a real consideration in all of their calculations.
Okay, so I think it's long enough. Thank you. So let's see, let's hope. Thank you very much. Hope to see you in Vienna after the pandemic. I think in Austria it's already a little bit more relaxed than in Israel, as I heard, but let's hope. And then we continue our discussions here in Old Vienna. Thank you very much. All the best.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
All the best.
Thank you.